Today we're going to break down a modern sermon that takes on one of the Bible's most difficult and, frankly, kind of terrifying passages. But instead of just doom and gloom, it offers up a recipe for strength, a kind of spiritual diet. And the whole thing, believe it or not, starts with a bowl of rib tips.
So this is the moment that kicks the whole thing off. The preacher is telling a story about the first time he ever tried a dish called rib tips at this little place called Zeb's. And it's this rich, slow-cooked meal. And the owner's simple comment, "That's soul food." Well, that becomes the key idea for understanding a prophecy that seems like the exact opposite of nourishing.
And that really is the central question here, isn't it? How can a passage that's just filled with warnings about destruction and betrayal possibly be seen as something good for you, something that strengthens your soul? It feels completely backwards. So let's see how the sermon actually makes this connection.
First, you gotta look at the source material itself, what the sermon calls the tough meat that we have to chew on. This all comes from the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus lays out this really stark and unsettling prophecy about what's to come.
It starts with his prediction of the complete and total destruction of the Jerusalem temple. I mean, you have to understand, this was the absolute center of their faith, their culture, their everything. To his listeners, this would have sounded like an unimaginable catastrophe.
But the warnings don't stop there. They zoom out to a global scale. Jesus starts talking about massive conflicts, wars, insurrections, basically a world that's tearing itself apart at the seams.
And then it gets deeply, deeply personal. This isn't just about faraway wars anymore. It's about betrayal at the most intimate level you can imagine, from your own family. And that this betrayal could lead to persecution and even death. It's just a picture of total chaos.
So, after hearing all that, destruction, war, family turning on family, the obvious question is, where's the good news in any of this? What possible hope could you find in a message that seems to promise nothing but suffering? And this is the point where the sermon's unique interpretation really kicks in.
So here's the twist. The sermon argues that this passage isn't about despair at all. Nope. Instead, it's a soul food diet. It's a counterintuitive cure, a spiritual plan designed to get believers ready for hard times, not to scare them away.
And the sermon defines its main idea in a really surprising way. This soul food isn't comfort food, it's training food. Think of it like the super planned diet of an athlete, where every single thing is chosen to build endurance and strength. This is a diet for survival.
The sermon then breaks this whole spiritual diet down into a really clear, easy-to-remember recipe. It points to 3 essential ingredients you need to develop the kind of endurance Jesus is talking about.
And here they are. Simple, right? Trust, truth, and hope. The sermon presents these not as just, nice ideas, but as active ingredients in a diet that, when you take them in, builds up your resilience from the inside out.
Okay, so the first ingredient, trust. The sermon makes a very direct point here. Jesus said the temple would be destroyed, and about 40 years later, historically, it was. So this fulfilled prophecy, even though it was a disaster, is presented as proof. The logic is, if he was right about that, then we can trust him on the rest of it, including the promise of getting through it all.
Next up, the main course of the meal is truth. And this is all about the principle of sola scriptura, the idea that the Bible is the ultimate source of truth. The sermon's argument is that if you know the scriptures for yourself, you're a lot less likely to be misled or manipulated by people trying to twist the message.
And this is where the sermon brings it right into the 21st century. It uses this whole soul food diet idea as a framework for how to deal with what it calls spiritual junk food, specifically the way faith can get tangled up in politics.
Now, the sermon gets very specific here and offers a direct critique of Christian nationalism. It presents it as an ideology that uses Christian language and symbols to gain political power. And the sermon argues this is the total opposite of the teachings of Jesus, which it says are all about self-giving love and service. It's basically framed as a counterfeit faith. To back this up, the sermon points to a really powerful moment in history, the Barmen Declaration from 1934. This was a document where German church leaders, in no uncertain terms, refused to let the Nazi Party take over their faith. The sermon holds this up not just as a history lesson, but as a blueprint for how to respond today when faith gets twisted for political goals. So, after all that, how does this all come together in the final takeaway? Well, beyond the history and the politics, the sermon's message zooms out to something universal: how to endure the personal storms that every single one of us has to face.
This really gets to the heart of it.
The sermon uses this powerful line from the Apostle Paul to describe a state of being where you're under pressure from every side, but you're not broken. The point isn't about avoiding the hard stuff, it's about being able to endure it without losing hope.
So, ultimately, the sermon's big conclusion is this. Even when the world outside is completely chaotic, there is a safe place that can be found on the inside. This inner peace is built on that diet of trust and faith, and it can hold you steady no matter what's going on around you.
And that leaves all of us with a final question to think about. This sermon offers one answer, rooted in a specific faith, but it's really a question for everyone. In a world that's always throwing challenges at us, both big and small, what's the soul food that nourishes you? What gives you the strength to endure?